Chapter 6. The anchor smelled like friar oil and cedar and the specific variety of loneliness that accumulates in a bar where the same 8 people sit in the same 8 seats 5 nights a week and say different versions of the same 8 things. Des had been in bars like this in Portland, the old ones, the ones that predated the craft cocktail invasion, where the bartender knew your drink and your dog's name and how long it had been since your last bad decision. The Anchor was that kind of bar, except smaller and older, and located in a town where the bad decisions were fewer because the options were fewer, which Des supposed was either a comfort or a tragedy, depending on your perspective. She was sitting at the bar because Kit had suggested it, which had surprised her. Kit, in Dez's developing mental profile, was a library person, a person who existed most fully in rooms with proper lighting and catalog shelves and the particular hush of a space dedicated to the organized preservation of knowledge. Kit in a bar was a category error, like finding a rare manuscript in a gas station, except that Kit was sitting 3 stools down from the pool table and looking entirely at ease, which meant Dez's mental profile was incomplete, which meant Des needed to update it, which was the kind of project her brain found irresistible. Leo set a beer in front of her without being asked, the same beer as last time, the malty local one that tasted like hops in proximity. "You're here together," Leo said. Not a question, an observation, delivered with the same tonal flatness he brought to weather reports and sandwich assembly. "We're here adjacently," Des said. "At the same time, in the same building. I don't think that constitutes together. You came in the same car. Kit doesn't have a car. Kit walked to your car and got in it and you drove here. That's together." Kit, who had been studying the menu with the intensity of someone reading a primary source document, looked up. "Leo, do you still have the halibut?" "When the boats come in." "Did the boats come in?" "Yesterday." "Then you have the halibut." Leo's eyebrow performed its keynote address. "You want the halibut. I want the halibut. She want the halibut?" Leo tilted his head at Des without looking at her, which was a conversational economy Des was beginning to appreciate about Leo. The man communicated in gestures the way some people communicated in paragraphs. "I don't know," Des said. "I haven't been consulted about the halibut." "Get the halibut," Kit said. "It's the best thing on the menu." "You haven't looked at the menu. You looked at it like you were reading it, but you already knew what you wanted." That was a performance. Kit's mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. A quarter smile. An acknowledgment that a thing had been observed that was accurate and slightly embarrassing. "I've been coming here since I was 25. The menu hasn't changed since I was 25. The halibut is the best thing on it, and it has been the best thing on it for 12 years. 13, Leo said, and disappeared into the kitchen. The halibut was, in fact, extraordinary. Des ate it the way she ate everything lately. Too fast, not tasting it properly for the first 3 bites, then slowing down as the reality of actual good food caught up with the mechanical urgency of a body that had been running on granola bars and institutional-grade coffee. The fish was pan-seared, crispy-skinned, resting on something involving potatoes and something else involving a sauce that tasted like butter and lemon, and decisions made by a person who cared about outcomes. "This is unreasonably good," she said. "Leo was a cook before he was a bartender. Before that, he was a fisherman. Before that—" Kit paused. The Kit pause. "I actually don't know what he was before that. I should ask." "You haven't asked?" "Some questions take 12 years to earn." Des looked at Kit. The bar's lighting was warm, amber, low, the kind of lighting designed to make everyone look slightly better than they did in daylight, which was charitable to most people and unnecessary for Kit, who looked the same in all lighting because Kit's face was the kind of face that didn't rely on flattery. Angular, attentive, the dark eyes behind the tortoiseshell frames doing their usual thing, which was seeing approximately 3 layers deeper than comfortable. She realized she was staring, and redirected her attention to the halibut, which did not stare back and was therefore a safer focal point. So, she said. So, Kit said, we've been talking about the station for 6 days. We have. And the logs, and Harriet, and the equipment. And I realized today, at the station, when the receiver did the thing, I realized I don't actually know anything about you. You, not you, the archivist. Not you, the person who's read the broadcast logs enough times to not give me a number when I asked. You. Kit set down their fork. The gesture was precise. The fork placed at a specific angle on the plate, the way you place a bookmark in a page you intend to return to. They removed their glasses, cleaned them on the hem of their flannel shirt. Dark green today, a shade that Dez's brain immediately cross-referenced with the moss on the station road and the spruce needles on the bluff trail, and put them back on. What would you like to know? What brought you here? Not the library, not the station. You. Kit was quiet for 5 seconds. Dez counted, because counting was reflex, and because Kit's pauses had duration and meaning, the way rests in music had duration and meaning. They were not absence, but structure, and the length told you what was coming next. My grandmother, Kit said. Dez waited. She was learning that waiting was the correct response to Kit beginning a sentence, the way holding a microphone steady was the correct response to a subject who was about to say the real thing underneath the rehearsed thing. My grandmother Thumiko grew up near here. Not Siren Bay, a town south on the coast, one of the ones that doesn't exist anymore. She married my grandfather after the war, and they moved to Seattle. And she never came back to live here. But she talked about the coast the way some people talk about a person they loved and lost. Kit picked up their beer, set it down without drinking. She told me stories about the water, the fog, the way sound carries differently on this part of the coast, and about a radio station on a bluff where a woman lived alone for 10 years and heard things that nobody else could hear. She knew about Harriet. She knew about the station. She told me the story the way you tell a child a fairy tale. The woman in the tower, listening to the voices from far away, building her machines to hear them better. I was 5, maybe 6. I thought it was a fairy tale. I thought the woman in the tower was invented, the way witches in cottages are invented. Kit's voice shifted, a fractional drop in register, the careful construction loosening at the seams. Then I was 9, and I came here for the summer, and some kid dared me to go up to the station, and I went. And you heard it? I pressed my ear against the fire door, the heavy one, the one in the hallway, the one that doesn't close properly. I could feel the metal was warm, which didn't make sense, because the building had been closed for decades, and there was no reason for any part of it to be warm. And under my ear, through the door, I heard. Kit stopped. The pause was different this time. Not construction, but courage. The specific silence of a person deciding whether to say the thing they'd been carrying for 28 years to someone they'd known for 6 days. I heard a hum, low, steady, like a machine running, but not mechanical, organic almost, like a heartbeat heard from inside. And under the hum, a voice. Dez's fork was on her plate. She hadn't put it there. Her hands had gone still. The fidgeting stopped. The wrapping of phantom cables stopped. Everything stopped. And the stillness was the tell, the signal her body sent when something was changing. A voice, she said. Female. I couldn't make out words, just the shape of them, the cadence, the rhythm, like hearing a conversation through a wall, through several walls, through... Kit reached for a word and couldn't find it. Reached again. Through something thicker than walls. Something that wasn't distance, but wasn't not distance either. The bar was loud around them. The 2 men at the far end had been joined by a third, and someone had activated the jukebox, which was playing something with steel guitar and the resigned optimism of a country song that knew it was going to end badly, but was committed to the chorus. Leo was washing glasses behind the bar with the focused attention of a man who was definitely listening, but would never admit it. None of this touched the space between Des and Kit, which had contracted to the dimensions of a shared frequency, a signal that only two receivers could pick up. I went back every day that summer, Kit said. Their voice was quiet, not whisper quiet, but the specific quiet of a person who had been loud about this exactly 0 times in their life and was determining what volume this kind of truth required. Some days the voice was there, some days just the hum, some days nothing. Silence, real silence, the kind where you know the system is off and not just resting. I kept a notebook. I documented the days and times and weather conditions and what I heard. I was 9. A breath that was almost a laugh. I was 9 years old, keeping field notes on a paranormal phenomenon, and I didn't tell anyone except my grandmother. She said, "Some places talk. Most people don't know how to listen." Kit took off their glasses again, held them, did not clean them. And then she said, "This is the part that I've thought about for 28 years, because I think she was trying to tell me something she didn't have the words for, or didn't have the permission for, or was afraid of." She said, "That station has been talking since before you were born, and it will talk after you're gone, and the only question that matters is whether you talk back." No. The word landed with the weight of something Kit had been holding up for a very long time. I was 9. I was already the kid who spent summers with their grandmother instead of at camp. I was already the kid who read too much and talked too little and got called weird in the specific, matter of fact way that children call other children weird when they mean you're not like us, and we've noticed. I wasn't going to add "here's voices at the abandoned radio station" to the list. Des understood this. She understood it in the way she understood audio, not as information, but as frequency, as the specific resonance of a thing she'd felt in her own body. The kid who heard everything. The kid who noticed the hum the refrigerator made and the pitch the neighbor's wind chimes played, and the way her father's voice dropped a half step when he was about to say something important in Farsi. The kid who was too much, too sensitive, too tuned in, always listening to the wrong channel when everyone else was listening to the right one. "I heard it too," she said. Kit looked at her. The bar light caught the frames of their glasses, which they were still holding, and without the glasses, Kit's face was open, more open than Des had seen it. The eyes that were usually precise behind the lenses were just eyes now, dark and deep, and looking at her with an expression that was not surprise, but something adjacent to it. Relief, maybe, or the feeling of a held breath finally being released after so long that the lungs had forgotten what full capacity felt like. "I know," Kit said. Not just the voice on the console, not just my name. Today, at the station with the receiver, I touched the junction box and she was doing the thing, the stacking thing, the clauses building on each other, and she made herself stop, breathe, start again. I felt Harriet, her hands. She was holding a piece of paper, and she was grieving, and the station showed me, Kit, like a memory that wasn't mine, playing through my body, through the equipment, through the coils, through whatever Harriet built into that receiver that makes it respond to. She gestured at herself, at the space between them, at the bar, the jukebox, the everything, to whatever we are. Kit put their glasses back on. The gesture was slow, deliberate, the ritual of a person putting their armor back on, one lens at a time. But the eyes behind the glass were different now, warmer, or not warmer, less guarded. The same temperature, but with a door open that had been closed before. I don't think rational is the word I'd use for my current state. You were methodical. You asked the right questions. You handled the logs correctly. Kit's voice had shifted again, the precision returning, the architecture of careful sentences rebuilding itself around something that had been, for a few minutes, unstructured and raw. You're the first person in 13 years who has heard the station, and you're the first person since Harriet who seems to know how to listen to it. I didn't say that at the library because it's a large thing to say to someone you've just met, that you've been waiting for them. The word waiting hung in the air between them, the way certain frequencies hang in a room after the source cuts out. Present, resonant, taking its time to decay. Des thought about the station, about the hum in the coils and the voice that said her name, and the hands she felt through the copper. The dead woman's hands holding the telegram about her brother, and the grief that wasn't hers and was entirely hers, and the way the building held it all, the memory, the sound, the waiting, like a receiver that had been tuned to a frequency nobody was broadcasting on. Patient, 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 until someone walked in and turned the dial. I heard it too, she said again, because it was the truest thing she could offer, and because Kit had given her 28 years of lonely listening, and the least she could do was give back the 4 words that meant you're not crazy, and you never were. Kit's hands went still on the bar. The tapping stopped. The pressing stopped. And what Des saw on Kit's face was not surprise. Kit had known since the library, had known since Des walked in at 8:47, looking like she hadn't slept, and asked about broadcast logs with the specific urgency of a woman who needed someone else to confirm what she'd experienced. But it was something else, a loosening, as if Kit had been holding something rigid in their body for years, decades, the muscular tension of a person bracing against the possibility that they were wrong and had just been given permission to let go. Good, Kit said. The word was quiet, almost nothing. The smallest word Kit had spoken all evening. Leo appeared at the end of the bar with the check and the expression of a man who had heard everything and would be processing it privately for several days before rendering an opinion. He set the check equidistant between them, which was either fair billing practice or a statement about the nature of their collaboration. Closing in 20, he said. Since when do you close at 9? Kit asked. Since I decided I'm closing at 9. Leo wipes the bar. Storm coming in tomorrow night. If you're going up to the station, bring a weather radio. The NOAA transmitter for this stretch has been acting up. Acting up how? Des asked. Picking up signals it shouldn't. Getting voices in the static. You know. Leo's face performed no particular expression. The usual. He moved to the other end of the bar, and Des watched him go. And she thought about a town where the bartender mentioned paranormal radio interference with the same tonal register he used for informing people the kitchen was closed. And she thought this was either the most insane place she'd ever been or the most honest, and she was beginning to suspect they were the same thing. They stood outside the Anchor in the October dark. The air was cold, the damp, patient cold of the Washington coast at night, the kind that got into your clothes and your hair and the spaces between your thoughts. The bay was invisible, just a sound, water against pilings, the rhythmic breathing of a body of water that was, like everything else in this town, quietly aware and not particularly concerned about being noticed. Kit had their hands in the pockets of the corduroy jacket, the moss-colored one. In the dark it looked almost black, and the collar was turned up against the wind, and Des was aware, in the way she was aware of all sounds, all frequencies, all signals, that she was noticing what Kit looked like in the dark outside a bar, and that this noticing was a different channel than the one she'd been tuned to for the past 6 days, and that switching channels without deciding to was either exciting or dangerous or both. Des? Yeah. Kit was looking at the bay, or at the dark where the bay was. Their breath was visible, small clouds forming and dissolving, the visible evidence of a living person processing air in a cold place. There's something else in the logs, Kit said. Something Harriet didn't write in the official record. Des's whole body went to the angle, the tilt, the listening posture, the head cocked 3 degrees to the right, like a dog hearing a frequency that humans aren't supposed to hear. What do you mean? I mean that in 1947, Volume 11, the one I haven't given you copies of yet, Harriet's margin notes stop being notes. They become something else. Entries. A parallel record. She was documenting something she couldn't put in the official log because it wouldn't have been believed, or because she was protecting someone, or because she was afraid. Kit turned from the bay. Their face in the dark was all angles and shadow, and the faint reflection of the bar's porch light in the lenses of their glasses. I found it my first year here. I've read it 100 times. I've never shown it to anyone. Because showing it to someone means it becomes real. It means I'm not the only person who knows. And that changes everything. And the precision cracked. A fragment, a restart. I'd been waiting for someone to show it to. The sentence landed in the cold air between them and stayed there. And Des heard it the way she heard everything. Not just the words, but the frequency underneath, the signal under the static, the 28 years of lonely listening, and 13 years of careful scholarship, and the particular courage required to stand outside a bar in October and tell a woman you'd known for 6 days that you'd been waiting for her. Kit's expression in the dark was the one Des couldn't fully parse, the one she'd been seeing since the library, the complicated, layered thing behind the glasses, and the careful sentences, and the archivist's precision. But she was getting closer. She was beginning to hear what it was, and what it was, she thought, was hope. The specific, cautious, hard-won hope of a person who had been listening to something for most of their life and had finally found someone who could hear it too. "Show me," Des said. Kit nodded, once. The kind of nod that was not casual, but contractual. An agreement, a threshold, a door opening between one room and the next. "Tomorrow," Kit said, "at the library. I'll have the volumes ready." They stood in the dark for another minute. The bay breathed. The wind carried the smell of salt and kelp and cold water, and the distant, faint, barely perceptible hum of a tower on a bluff 3 miles away that was, Des was almost certain, humming louder tonight than it had been this morning. She drove Kit to the library. Kit got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk and said, "Thank you for the ride." And for a pause, longer than the others, the kind of pause that contained a sentence Kit had decided not to say, and the ghost of the unsaid sentence was almost louder than the words that replaced it. For the halibut. That was Leo. Des watched Kit walk to the library's side entrance, the one that led to the upstairs apartment Des hadn't known existed until this moment, until she saw Kit pull out a key and let themselves into the building they worked in and lived in and kept their secrets in. And the light that came on in the upper window was warm and yellow, and it stayed on as Des pulled away from the curb and drove through the empty town to the bait and reel. She parked. She sat in the car for 3 minutes, engine off, listening. The bay, the wind, a halyard clanging against a mast somewhere at the dock, a metallic rhythm, irregular, the maritime equivalent of a phone ringing in an empty room. And underneath it all, if she held her breath and angled her head and listened the way she listened to everything, with her whole body, with the attention that had cost her Marcus and her career and her sleep and possibly her grip on the ordinary world, she could hear it. The hum, 3 miles away and 70 years old and coming from a building that should not have been making any sound at all. A signal broadcasting to an empty frequency. Patient, 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 waiting for someone to tune in. She went upstairs. She sat on the bed. She opened the broadcast logs to the page she'd left off, October 1943, Harriet's handwriting getting smaller and faster. The margins beginning to fill with the parallel record Des didn't have access to yet, but Kit did. Kit, who had been carrying this alone for 13 years and was going to open the door tomorrow and let her in. She read until 2 a.m. She slept with the logs on the pillow next to her, like a letter from someone she was getting to know. and the rain started sometime after 3. And in the rain and the dark and the particular insomnia of a woman whose life was changing frequency, she thought about Kit's face in the bar light, and Kit's hands on the water glass, and the word waiting, and what it meant to find someone who could hear the thing you'd been hearing alone your whole life. She dreamed about the station. In the dream, the console was warm and the tower was humming, and there were 2 chairs at the desk instead of one, and she couldn't tell if the dream was hers or the station's, or if there was a difference anymore. The rain continued, the bay breathed. 3 miles away, on a bluff above the Pacific, the tower hummed its low, steady note into the October dark, and the building held its breath, and the frequency was open, and something on the other side was waiting for tomorrow. Chapter 6.